Prova, prova, prova. No? More? On, yes. Try again. Now? I think it's on. Okay, we start. Aleksandra? Inizi, non dico niente, inizi tu. Dico solo welcome everybody. So, welcome everybody. We're starting. This is the last exercise of We Who Are Not the Same, exercises towards the unmaking of patriarchy, control, dominion, and other male cogito misplaced potencies, a quite complex title that we have been trying to unfold in the course of 2 years with a series of exercises, researches, performances, conversations, debates. And tonight, together with Aleksandra, Jach, Antje Majewski, Marwa Hasani, and Federica Bueti, yes, we are going to have a discussion that hopefully is going to enhance conversation. So let's remember that this is an exercise, it's not a formal lecture, so you're all invited to engage with us and to make questions and comments and be together here. So Federica is introducing the evening and the event and giving a curatorial framework of this exercise. Thank you for being here.
Hello, can you hear me? Yes. Thank you very much for being here. My name is Federica Bueti, and I'm part of the research and exhibition project We Who Are Not the Same, curated by Elena Gudio, Natalie Bicoro, who unfortunately cannot be here tonight, and myself. And we have been working basically for, yes, almost 2 years, as Elena said, and researching on feminist practices, the colonial feminist practices and politics. And we conceived these 2 basically years of like public events as a sort of kind of, if you want, kind of performative research. So as a moment also for us to learn and about each other practices and invite curators, writers, artists, and activists to share their experiences and practices with us. So this was also like, you know, for us as a curator, a moment of learning and hopefully of I don't know. But this is the last exercise of the series, and the next step of this project is actually an exhibition and a public program which open in January. The exhibition is called Ecologies of Practice, Ecologies of Darkness. Sorry, I was thinking about Ecologies of Practices, but the title is Ecologies of Darkness, Building Grounds on Shifting Sands. And it will open on the 10th, and then the 25th and 26th of January, we will have a public program. And this exhibition is a little bit somehow a way of you know, gathering all the knowledge that we have acquired into this during these 2 years, and also like bring together all the questions and the problems we face actually during this project, because it's not just, you know, a project that we developed for the audience, but it was also really a way for us to work on ourselves basically, and to, like, as a team, to, you know, think about the way we work together, the way we do things, the kind of knowledge that we produce, the kind of like publicness that we are looking for. And so it was a pretty kind of too intense year of figuring out how to work together. So tonight we invited Marwa Hasani, Antje Majewski, and Aleksandra, Jach. to join us and to share with us their practices and research on question of the commons, of ecological thinking, of sustainability, and alliances also. And I just want to briefly share with you a few thoughts about the common and about the necessity of envisioning commons that are not somehow already kind of co-opted or co-optable within the current capitalist systems. And as we know, I mean, capitalism has basically subordinated any form of life and knowledge to the logic of the market. And so this has heightened our awareness of the danger of living in a world where we no longer have access to sea, trees, animals, and our fellow beings, except through the cash connection, not through money. The global expansion of capitalist relations is a history of violence and destruction, the extraction and exploitation of labor power, of natural resources, the expropriation of lands, ecological disasters, the extinction of plants and animal species, the pollution of the ocean, mass incarceration, the privatization of the commons, and the atomization of the individual, as well as the destruction of knowledges and the erasure of histories and memories. The loss of memory is the root of oppression, for obliviousness to the past renders meaningless the world in which we move, strip the spaces in which we live of any significance, as we forget at what cost we tread the ground we walk upon, and whose history are inscribed in the stones, fields, and buildings that surround us. Loss of memory makes for a silent environment in which our struggles have little chance to success, confronted with the cacophony of paid-up media and political lies. Overcoming the state of oblivion is where a feminist perspective teaches us to start in the reconstruction of the commons and new forms of sociality. No commons is possible unless we refuse to base our lives and reproduction on the suffering of others. The challenge we face today is, as Silvia Federici reminds us, not so much about how to multiply common initiatives, but how to place at the center of our organizing the collective reappropriation of the wealth we have produced and the abolition of social hierarchies and inequalities. It is only by responding to these imperatives that we can rebuild communities and make sure that these commons do not rest on new forms of colonization. The production of the commons, as the ecofeminist Maria Mies observes, requires a profound transformation in our everyday life in order to recombine what the social division of labor and capitalism has separated. So how do we see the connections between the materialities of power and the technologies of violence? Feminist practice entails engaging in solidarity with the colonial struggles across times and space, and in transnational and transgenerational forms of solidarity. It also involves a culture of collective organization based on reciprocity and the distribution of labor and resources, a learning and sharing effective strategies that are committed to dismantling system of power, forging new political intimacies, and recovering global memories of internationalism. However, as a Palestina diaspora writer Nadia Elia reminds us, solidarity is not only solidarity towards other groups, but also to the land, to other species, because justice is indivisible. So the reconstruction of the commons depends on the quality of relations, on a shared sense of responsibility, on an economy built on a non-competitive, solidarity-centered mode of life. Women's struggle for the commons across the world have taken the forms of a mobilization against the destruction of natural resources and land grabbing and social dispossession. Feminist communing require intentional work in getting to know each other's histories, in prioritizing strategies, in enacting and reciprocating solidarity when someone else's body is on the line. So one of the reasons for inviting our guests tonight is because their practices ask questions and reflect on the construction of feminist commons, touching upon issues of responsibility, solidarity, sustainability, transmission of knowledges, and preservation of life, while imagining practices of resistance in times like us of ecological disaster, of war, of gender violence. So they will be sharing with you their thoughts and reflection on their current research. And I think the way we will proceed is first Antje and Aleksandra will basically share some of the projects. They have been collaborating for a long time, and they just opened an exhibition at the Hamburger Bahnhof called How Do We Talk to... Just a second, I have it here. You want to say?
How to talk to birds, trees, fish, shells, snakes, bulls and lions.
Yes, exactly, thank you. Yes, it is a good exercise. So they will share their thoughts, and so they will present something, and then Marwa Hasani will also introduce her practice and a recent project, Who is Afraid of Ideology. And she will also give a 15 minutes presentation, something like that. And then I think, yeah, they will give us some inputs that then we can kind of unpack and discuss collectively. So please feel free to, you know, hijack the conversation, to ask questions, because this is really, I mean, it's an open platform, very informal. And I think we're all here to learn something, so don't feel free actually to share your thoughts with us. And just quickly maybe read the bios. So Marwa Hasani is an artist, filmmaker and researcher who reconsiders politics of the mid-20th century from a contemporary perspective with a specific focus on gender relations, urbanism and industrialization. She approaches research collaboratively and seeks to work across disciplines. Arsanios' work has been the subject of solo exhibition at the Beirut Art Center, Hammer Museum, Los Angeles, Witt de Witt Center for Contemporary Art, Rotterdam, among others. Aleksandra Jach works as a curator at the Museum Tsuki? Wonderful. What? Tsuki? of in Łódź, Poland. And recent projects include Antje Majewski and All Apple, an introduction, Over and Again, Avant-Garde and Surrealism, with Marta Zach something, but sorry. Everything is connected to everything else, Festival of Literary Translation in Gdansk, the Anthropocene Index, Superorganism, the Avant-Garde and the Experience of Nature, a Museum Tsuki in Łódź. Antje Majewski is an artist and initiator of various curatoria, activist and research projects. Her work as a painter, filmmaker and collaborative transdisciplinary artist explores ecofeminism, IFA. Actually, Antje and Aleksandra founded a sort of kind of collective that address issue of ecology, and it's called EFA, that stands for ecofeminist anarchist.
Yeah, we will share with you our doubts and thoughts later about this.
Exactly. Okay. So please welcome our guests.
Hello, can you hear me? Yeah. Thank you very much for the introduction. Thank you very much, everybody, for coming here. I have a question to you all. Can you point out if there's some empty chairs next to you? Maybe you can stand up. So maybe the people who are in the back and who don't have a good seat can come here, just for a second, because no. So there's still some empty chairs over here, and if you are very much in the back and you can't see anything, you can move over here.
No, but this is the thing, yeah.
So
To restart the projector now.
no, it's mine.
No, but they have to do something with the projector.
Yeah, no, it's mine. Yeah. Rather want glimpses of was involved in various also the show that we are showing that we did together in Hamburger Bahnhof comes out of such maybe wish to work together, as well as saying that I don't want to sit here alone, but I want my very good friend Aleksandra Jach to sit here with me, and we present this together. I very much believe that the problems that you were just now talking about are so big that there is really no point in pretending even that we can deal with them alone. So each of these super huge topics are something that we have to tackle together with others, and in preference in an international way, or rather in a planetary way, because I don't really believe in nations. So yeah, it's super big topics we have here. So I start with some rather fun pictures from a group I was involved with several years ago called FF. It's basically my feminist background that I'm showing you. We founded a collective that became 16 self-defined females. And we did a lot of different activities. Not all of them were costumed, as it seems here. But yeah, a lot of them were actually fun. We had exhibitions. We also had discussions. We had research. We had a library. We had performances of various kinds. I'm sorry, I'm going through this quite quickly now, because you can check this all out on my website if you're interested. It's under like there's overtitle like collaborative and curatorial. And yeah, so we had different kinds of.
Based in Berlin, or it was an international group? Sorry.
We were started in Berlin, but our process was actually based on the idea of temporary autonomous zone. It's a concept coming from classic anarchism of Hakim Bey. And the idea was that we would go into different cities and create new alliances with the female artists that were already working in these cities. So we would go to Vienna, Berlin, and Warsaw, and try to find out who is working there. And each new person that we would meet could bring in other people, and so the network was constantly growing in a very organic way. And then the idea was that everybody could propose a project, and my job was a little bit to see which projects were kind of similar and bring people together so that they could maybe work together on something. And then finally, we all enabled each other to actually do what we wanted to do. So because often the situation for artists is that, sorry. The situation for artists might be that you have a really wonderful idea, but you don't have the budget, and you need people to do it with you, because, and then if you're a studio artist and you have a big studio, you employ people, then this thing might cost 6,000 euros. But if you have feminist friends and you do it in a self-organized way, it might cost €0 and be a lot more fun. So this was a little bit what we were trying out. Yeah, we had podium discussions, exhibitions, all kinds of stuff. And it took 3 years until we reached a point that a lot of self-organized groups have, probably, which is that the workload became huge and the budget was 0, and suddenly we just imploded. Yeah. But it was a great time, and I'm very, very proud of having been part of this. This here, for example, was a demonstration to have more female painters in the National Gallery. There were so many different activities, and I will now go from there to quite a different thing. Okay, sorry if I'm rushing, but we want to leave space for the discussions. Okay, there we go. So meantime, my own, let's say, the practice that I had as an artist working inside institutions was going more and more into ecological topics. I just want to present one project here which is ongoing. It's a project about apples that I started in Museum Stuck in Łódź in 2014 with the curators Aleksandra, Jach and Joanna Sokołowska. And it's a project that I originated through an email conversation with the conceptual artist Paul Freisler. So I'm showing again some images. In this project we have, let's say, several interlinking parts. One is a very classical exhibition inside the institution, which has various elements. These are dried apples that Paul Freisler is doing since several years. And he started to make identical copies of them. At the time that we did the first edition, we had to have these kind of plastic 3D copies in the foreground. Now technology has moved forward and we are now able to do color printed 3D copies. But of course, like the aim for the future would be to have exactly identical copies. And here you have one of these apples. Then you have extremely classical oil paintings, like oil painting still lifes by myself, which show various old apple varieties, old and new apple varieties, also the first genetically modified apple variety. This was the second edition in Museum Abteilberg in Mönchengladbach. Here you see how these dried apples of Paul Freisler are displayed in a vitrine. This is what they look like. And the 3D printer. Is it too fast? Is it okay? Yeah. And now the third edition was in Kunsthalle Lingen this year. So I'm just showing, it can get bigger and smaller. This one here is in Worpswede, also this year. And I'm super happy to announce that next year we will have iteration here in Berlin, in Galerie im Turm, and Lena Reisner is here. She will be the curator. I'm mentioning this because the second very important part of these old apple varieties, but I also made and basically these here are actually the original apples, the Malusi versi in Kazakhstan, where you find them in wild apple forests. And this guy here is now taking seeds from them because he wants to bring them back to Austria, where Arche Noah is running a project of like keeping old all kinds of like old cultured plants alive and farming them again. And so out of this research that I did, and which took quite a long time, over 2 years, I was traveling to all these different places. And now this was just a small selection. I think I spoke altogether with like 25 different research institutes or whatever, apple breeders, and so on. I learned so much about the status of our, like what is really going on with agriculture, and what also it means to this transition from wild plants to cultured plants, yeah, and what is happening just now, or like the last decades on a global scale with our cultured plants, because in a way you can take the apple as an example. I did another project that I will not show here about wheat, not wheat, about, sorry, this was like, actually, I met one of my favorite interview partners in Kazakhstan, Yazan Uralbekov, a Kazakh. He told me that I really have to come back and do another research project about marijuana, because it's also originally from Kazakhstan. Okay. But that's for the future. So, yeah. Sorry. Now, about Weizen. What is Weizen? Wheat, not wheat, but wheat. No, I was right. Yeah. I was right. Yes, sorry.
You were on the right track.
Yeah.
Everybody interpreted as
So wheat with EA. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so I did another project that dealt with the origin of wheat in an area of Israel, Lebanon, and its transition as a cultural plant over Europe and so on. And I found that basically a lot of the things that I'd learned with the apple I could find again when looking at wheat. And maybe what is a little bit special about my method is that I'm learning by basically what you could call oral history. I have a master in history a long time ago. I studied social history, and it's kind of coming back to me that I was doing a lot of like research on the theory of history writing. And I think I'm particularly interested in learning from people who actually have the practice, who are actually dealing with this topic. And I have, like in this catalog here, yeah, we can give it to read. In the back part is actually all these interviews, even the ones I had to throw out a lot from the documentary film. It became like 3 hours long and very boring. So basically all this interview found their place in the catalog as text, and it became a quite extensive book about the situation of apples as an example for loss of biodiversity and coming from this, I think I just, before I give the microphone to Aleksandra, I just want to show you on my website again a little project. Oh, sorry, I should continue a little bit further. Sorry, just a little bit. Because what is quite important is that the second very important part of the project was that we decided to plant apple trees in the cities. So actually to use the museum budget to buy apple trees of local old varieties that are not planted anymore in a modern monoculture agriculture. And this is like the celebration of the first apple trees that we planted together. You see us. And was really that we in public ground in all the cities that I've been doing the project so far, and this starting in Łódź, and we involved schools. We defined schools also as public ground, you know. But very important is to find people who will take care of the apple trees. So there's always like a relationship, one person to one apple tree, or like a group of people to one apple tree, because the first 2-3 years the trees are quite vulnerable. They sometimes need water, they need care, and these people then are willing to take care of an apple tree that they don't own, yeah, because the apple tree is owned by the whole community. It's not owned by the city, it's not owned by the museum, it's owned by everyone that, it's not owned by anyone actually. Yeah, this is maybe the point, the basic anarchic impetus behind this. It's because even the commons in the medieval times that Silvia Federici described were of course owned by the villages. Yeah, they were not open to the next village, for example. They were a place in the middle of the village where they are, by general discussion between the villagers, they would find out who would put their animals when onto this common ground. Whereas I think now we have these rather large communities called cities, and they give us this opportunity to reappropriate the common ground, which is to us ours, yeah, ours, the citizens. It doesn't belong to the politicians. It doesn't belong to, anyone. All these parks next to the streets and so on, they are actually ours. So why not plant something that we can eat? And of course, I'm not the first one to come up with this idea. There have been really great initiatives in various places. And I think it's also not about being original in the sense of like art has to be original. No, it's in the sense it's something that simply makes sense. Yeah, and I think more and more I want to do things that make sense. So we have planted. This is a apple celebration in Mönchengladbach in the Skulpturengarten that was kind of like organized itself by all the people that were brought together through my project. So I didn't organize it, they organized it. This is also something that happens very much with this Apple project, that suddenly, all kinds of people have ideas and then they can all do them. So it's again a little bit like a temporary autonomous zone. So if they feel like, now we should have a big Apple celebration, then they can do it and it will happen. This was with some school classes, and this is the program where we link a tree with a person. The greenery department would give us free spaces, and then the person can say, okay, this is quite close to my home, and I can take care of this apple tree. And I'm explaining this because, of course, next year in Berlin, we will also plant trees. We are just now starting to speak with the greenery department, and I very much hope that maybe some of you or your friends will be interested to maybe have a look if you also might want to adopt a tree. Yeah. Okay, so these are like happy godparents. This is like all the places in Lingen where we planted trees. This is the last tree that we planted in Worpswede. Okay, and now, just sorry, it takes only like 1 second, only because you mentioned this. Sorry, wait, where is it here? I didn't plan to show this, but. Sorry. Yeah, I just want to show this here just for like a second, because we were asked about our heroines that we relate to, and this was an exhibition that I did also in the framework of the Apple project, because I was asked to do a contribution to Luther, and I really thought, what the hell am I going to do there? And then I did a research about Luther's denial to the peasant revolution at the time, which was really heavy, and this is exactly the time that Silvia Federici describes in Caliban and the Witch. So I decided to paint her portrait, which is this here. This is Silvia, and I just wanted to show this because we created a little commons here outside this museum. We planted some apple trees, but more importantly for me, I just replaced Luther and Erasmus von Rotterdam by my heroines, Rosa Luxemburg and Silvia Federici, and I just thought it might be nice to mention this. Yeah. Okay, now I give you the...
Antje, can I ask you to open this photo with like this group photo of us, so we are smiling and looking at each other? I think that I want to start with this, with empathy and empathetic communication, because we finish our presentation with it as well, with presenting So the Apple project was a part, or like was organized in the frame of within the frame of Urban Ecologies, the program I curated with my friend Katarzyna Swoboda at Muzeum Sztuki in Łódź. And the origins of this idea was just to do something out of the institution buildings. Yeah, this was very simple, but it was happening in Łódź almost 10 years ago. And I don't know if you ever been to Łódź or you ever been to Poland. Łódź has amazing history of post-industrial city, and it was really destroyed in the 90s because of this brutal capitalism which entered to Poland, and very active, politically engaged working class was out of sudden, without the work, without the places they recognize as part of their identity. So after 2000, like in 90s and around 2000, I think almost 40,000 people left, just left Łódź, emigrated abroad to find a job. So this is, I'm talking about this because this is really important. And this was really important for us as employees of a public institution with a public mission and with an amazing history of an institution founded by the artists. Yeah, because these are origins of Muzeum Sztuki. This is institution founded by the artists who just came to Łódź and decided to do something there. Yeah, something what they believe will be maybe utopian, but also very. They still use this word progressive, in a positive sense. So urban ecologies were our response or our way of thinking then with about the environment of this avant-garde museum in a city of working class without work. Museum buildings are located in the center of the city, in a district called Stare Polesie, like a working class district. So in 2010, when I moved to Łódź, they were this district was and Łódź had a very bad. How to call it? What you can read about Łódź in the Polish media and how people perceive Łódź still is very negative, because of this aura of post-industrial city, which is struggling with many basic problems, economical problems. So for us, this was really like very reduced perspective of thinking about the city, and we were trying to find what is happening actually around us, and we were trying to find a potential in what is around, in the people, in the relations, which were very rich, and so we were doing a lot of performative actions, concerts, a workshop for children. We even play badminton on some abandoned in some abandoned places, and we collaborate with different people, not only with the artists, because the idea was that we think about different people we wanna invite to this project. So collaborate with people from Łódź, but out of sudden, like I remember, I have to mention this, but why we invited you actually, somebody who was never connected with the city. So we've been on the amazing exhibition Animism, curated by Anselm Franke and with Joanna Sokołowska, and we saw a film of Antje, The Shell, in which she talked to Isa Samp, and this was amazing. And this film you can see also at Hamburger Bahnhof, and it's really so we kind of fall in love in the way how she ran this conversation and how she felt, like how she transmits what she was getting from Isa, and this was very beautiful. Beautiful for us. We didn't we didn't have time to verbalize it, or like to I don't conceptualize it. We just invited her. But now, after these years and different collaborations we had already, I think that this was something, what I mentioned at the beginning, this empathy. So so now we're thinking about new, that we want to continue our collaboration, and not in institutional frames, yes, and this is not about thinking on a different, new topics, but rather about new ways of collaborations. So we can. So this is something I wanted to add to this Apple project, to situate it. Yeah, and I don't know if you follow news about the different environmental topics, but now in Poland there is a climate summit in Katowice, COP24. This is a very important thing, and a lot of friends are involved in this, in the march for climate, and the different ways of expressing our anger on our government, who is trying to keep a track, very conservative track, and this is something very urgent, and many artists are also involved in this protest and demonstrations. Also, people who were females mostly, artists, poets, musicians, who you see on this photo, which was taken a few years ago. And this was this was protest against the cutting the trees all over in the different parts of Poland, because of decision of Minister of Environment, who decided to just withdraw from allow people to cut trees on their private possessions without any permission. Yeah, so they decided to act. And this was really group initiative. People mostly from Krakow, but not only. I don't want to name them really, because this is too large group. But they call themselves Polish mothers on a tree stumps. Yeah. So the idea was to breastfeed their children on a tree stumps in a different parts of Poland, and just take a photo and make it viral. Yeah, and this was really viral action. Yeah. And this and it's also related with, of course, as with female rights, and also hot discussion in Poland about breastfeeding and female bodies, and it's still something what we have to deal with there. And this so Polish mothers evolve to what you see now. So this is River Sisters, and I'm also a part of this collective. It's very so yeah. Environmental destruction in Poland, so devastation, which is supported paradoxically by the state, is continuing, and one of the ideas one of the ideas which were related with it is industrialization of Polish rivers. So this was the protest against building another dam on Wisła. There is a huge dam already, which is in a very bad state. So this is an argument for authorities to build another dam because of the dangers of a flood. But this is all the arguments are really out of any economical reasons, any pragmatic reasons. Yeah, so this is something like all these initiatives, female, like run mostly by female, yeah, are really important for me because of the way how they act, yeah, how we organize themselves. This is very open structure, as I said. No leader. There are some people who are more often in the medias and are more recognized. Action also went viral, and actually different women we didn't know from different parts of Poland start to take a photo of themselves in the rivers, which were very deaf for them. Yeah, so yeah.
How did the state react to this protest?
They didn't. These are very very affirmative and positive happenings. So for them, it's really difficult to respond on it because we never this is not non-violent protest, very direct, yeah, because we know what we want, yeah. But on the other hand, we don't. We try to keep this non-violent communication, yeah. So there was a situation during one happening when they organized contra demonstration, and they rent huge boats with people on it, and they were shouting on us. But we were singing then. This was our response, yeah. So we always try to keep it that way because we believe that only this constructive and non-violent communication can bring something. When you start to be aggressive, this is the end, yeah.
I think it depends on the context. I wouldn't generalize, but I think, yes, I think in some occasion it's good to be non-violent, but there are moments I feel where you also there is violence and there is a reason for that. It's not entirely wrong. That would be my position, in the sense that we need all of it.
We can discuss it because I don't feel it that way, yeah. Okay, so now we can jump to the latest recent project we did with Antje at Hamburger Bahnhof. Do you want to start?
Yeah, maybe I wanted to ask Elena if she has some questions to pose to us, because maybe some of you have already seen the exhibition also, maybe some of you will see the exhibition. It's a very complex one, and we don't have the time to go into it. Also by the public.
So I think that is not that the story of the exhibition, you've been invited by the Hamburger Bahnhof to have a solo show, and then slowly thinking through what was your proposal, you came up with such a constellation of different artists. You invited also Aleksandra to join you in the research. And because I have the impression that your artistic practice and your research is fundamentally embodying an interesting feminist perspective because of this idea of reciprocity, because of the importance of caring for you, the importance of always having dialogues, the importance of creating alliances and moments of togetherness. I wanted to ask you how did it come that this exhibition at the end is functioning, for me at least, as a symphony. So each work is resonating with each other, and each work is not a statement in itself, but is enriched by the perspective of the artist accompanying the narrative of the exhibition, and also how you're trying, if I'm maybe I'm wrong, but how you're trying to rethink the idea of authorship, so your artistic authorship is somehow being not withdraw, but you want to complexify it and avoid this atomization of the individuum, as you were saying. I don't know if this is a pertinent question in regards to the exhibition, but in general, also because we are thinking through these ideas, ecologies of practices, the enrichment of dialogues. It's interesting, and also the fact that you're trying to bring in your research the experiences of teaching, the experience of creating friendship, the experience of activism and environmental activism as well. So yes, maybe that's a comment, but take it as a question or as something to start a reflection.
I can maybe say that in the recent years, since quite many years, I haven't done any solo shows, so people already know probably when they invite me that I might bring in other people. Sometimes more, sometimes less. Sometimes I bring in only 1 or 2 people, depending on what it is. Yeah. But the only place I do solo shows so far is the gallery here in Berlin I work with, because the gallery space is somehow, I haven't really figured that out. Not yet, what that actually is, a gallery space. Here on this photo you see this person that is very important to me, Issa Sompt. You only see him from the back. I'm sorry, in my selection I don't have a better photo. These are his works, and the title and the whole idea to the exhibition came actually out of a conversation with him that I had in Dakar about 2 months before Melanie Romiguier asked me first to do something in Hamburger Bahnhof. And I hadn't seen Issa in quite a while, since Documenta actually. When I saw him again, he asked me, Antje. Issa Sompt is a Senegalese, or was a Senegalese artist and philosopher and playwright and many other things, who was also one of the co-founders of an artistic collaborative group, the Laboratoire Agit Art, founded in 1974 in Dakar. And I think this is one of the most astonishing groups, artistic groups in the whole of Africa, if I may say so, or also in the whole world, for me. Let's go beyond that. Because, they took in a lot of ideas that came, that were maybe like in the air from like student revolution and situationism and all these things coming from Paris, but they merged it together with philosophies and ways of doing things that were very traditionally Senegalese or even Lebu, in the case of Issa Sompt. And this created something hybrid that was, I think, super interesting, and that they positioned at the time against the negritude of Leopold Senghor. Because they said they were not interested in a fake essentialism of our being of this negritude movement. We are more interested in laboratoires, in researching something together. And I think this practice is something that I learned from Issa, and maybe also when I started with others, this FF group, for example, this was also such a laboratoire. I think, as Issa also said, the Laboratoire Agit Art is a very specific group that existed in Dakar. But the methodology is something that, of course, you could use for many other things. And now I would say, for example, this whole exhibition is a sort of a laboratory, a laboratoire. And I myself, I'm mostly interested in doing exhibitions as a form of thinking together. And because I'm a visual artist, I do a lot of research, but my main way of thinking is as an artist, in an artistic way. So such an exhibition is for me a a moment where I can. The Hamburger Bahnhof, thank you, Hamburger Bahnhof, gave me the opportunity to bring together people that are my friends since long time. Some of them, some I met during projects, some I got to know through this project, bring them together and learn something new for myself also, yeah, and also to involve the public to learn something, you know. So I think it's a laboratory is a research, a deep research that involves the person who asks as much as all the people in participating in the research. And as I said, this research can be not only in this academic way that we are now used to, getting more and more used to also in art, in artistic research practices, but I think you can just as well research through poems or through photographs or through all kinds of different artistic materials. So within the project, each of us artists has their own artistic language for the question of the authorship. I do my paintings and I don't have someone else participating in them. I do my own videos. These are photos by Olivier Gessile-Garay, for example. We have, and nobody else could do them exactly like him, you know, but all these things together become something that creates a more like a symphony is nice, yeah, like a or more like a freestyle jazz session maybe, yeah, something like that. Is that? Mm-hmm.
And especially because we can discuss together.
Just want to ask a quick question. Do the different communes interact with each other? Like, do they form networks? Do they have moments where they come collectively?
Yeah, so it's organized by, so every commune has their own assembly, and then there is a general assembly, you know, so it's organized in this like bottom-up structure where communes have, you know, they are also co-chaired. So there's always like a, I don't know if people know this system, or I have to explain this a bit more, maybe. Huh?
Do you know the system? How many? Yes.
Okay. So every cooperative is organized in a commune, and every commune is co-chaired by a man and a woman. Women only the women can vote for the women, but women and men can vote for the man. So that's a way to sort of like secure the female votes. And also, so as I said, like all communes then, so there's like a general assembly for all communes. And for example, in the sense of when we're talking about agricultural communes. So it's all like bottom up, yeah? Is it clear as a structure? Like small communes and then general commune.
And how is the relationship then? Like, are there, like when you get to this, like a more, there is a larger assembly and then the singular, like the individual communes. Is there a problem of hierarchies again? Like everything needs to go through any decision needs to go through that.
Yeah. I mean, I have to say something. In fact, a lot of the people who are also like doing these, like supervising these projects, like for example, supervising the construction of this village, are coming from a party system, which is very hierarchical. And it's completely different. I mean, the villagers and the farmers, they're not coming from a party system. So they are not in this kind of hierarchical, working in this hierarchical structure. And there is a lot of clashes then that happens between, you know, people that are members of the co-ops and the people that are actually, you know, they call them, supervise. It's the cadros of the party, basically. And this is where the real politics is happening, but when these clashes are, you know, occurring. I mean, for the first time in my life, when I was in Jinwar, I saw a guerrilla woman, you know, really getting angry and screaming. I never saw a guerrilla, because the guerrilla women are usually very like super controlled, you know. But I think that they are not used to working in these kind of situations. Also, there is a lot of politics going on. I mean, the farmers are more secure in these places because it's their land and it's their, you know, they are in their own place somehow. And the cadres of the party are not. So there is a lot of, you know, power dynamics that are erupting as well within this whole.
Just last comment. What I find very, very interesting about, like, let's say, your way of looking at the communes and what you like highlight also in a beautiful text that you find on eFlux, which is part of the larger project, Who is Afraid of Ideology, Ecofeminist Practices Between Internationalism and Globalism. And there is this moment where you describe this place of contradiction, no? That in the constitution of the commons, in this idea of commoning, exactly this place, this kind of coming together, it's full of contradictions, no? That are unsolvable. but that somehow coexist in that space. No, so there is exactly the need for self-defense, and at the same time, this kind of ecological thinking. So this kind of like a move in between, war. So the necessity. Someone, one of the women you interviewed, say something about when we fight, we need to break branches of trees. So there is actually violence in that moment, while at the same time there is a desire also for exactly like develop a system that is kind of like actually not about violence at all. So yeah, this is just a comment, but that kind of place, that also resistance. That's why before I was saying, like, of course, I mean, non-violent resistance, I think we can agree on that is very, very important, but it's not the only strategy. There are many strategies and tactics that needs to be used in order to create that space of common.
But sorry, but I think, just to cite one of our friends who is actually doing a project on the Wisra River, we were discussing also between the artists what are strategies, and she said like, I'm thinking about sometimes, like maybe we need to go like use violence. But do I see myself with a machine gun? I don't think that would be such a great idea in Poland in the current situation. If a group of females would get some machine guns, I don't think that would work. Sorry to say this, give this comment back about the liberal woman. I think each country, each region, each specific place has to develop their own tactics. Yeah? You cannot actually transfer what's going on in Syria to what's going on in Poland. So I think I just wanted to put this in the middle because I think, for each specific problem, which is in this case the problems of the river regulation of the last wild river of Europe, which is like a very important struggle, I think, nobody knows which is the ideal way to go into that struggle, but I can confidently say it's not by taking a machine gun, I think.
I just want to add that, I completely agree that there are different strategies to reach the aim, like as the commons, how to govern the commons. And in the context of river sisters and different environmental struggles in Poland, I think that this is really different situation because river sisters are working in a very they are going in many alliances with activists, and of course it's not only happy and friendly, but everybody, like in the details, when we start to discuss in the details how we vision this commons later on, we have different ideas how to be with the river, because if we don't perceive it as a commodity, and if we don't want to industrialize it for a transport or for very this kind of things. On the other hand, we have a tourism, so these are the big issues, if we don't industrialize it, maybe we can use it as a touristic attraction, and this is also not close to my heart, and to not the aim of River Sisters, and this is there is a lot of ambivalence inside environmental movement, because many people don't think that we should fight for just tourists, more tourists, and a primeval Białowieża primeval forest in Poland, or for Wisła, but it's very difficult to discuss it now in this complex alliances with activists who say let's build another national park. Let's do national Wisła, all of Wisła national park. Let's use these familiar categories which are outdated in my opinion. We don't, maybe another reservat is not a solution. So I just want to clarify it.
Just briefly, if I may, then of course we also open to the public. I would like to ask you, Marwa, because we are talking about context, and in this little booklet that you published recently, Towards a Feminist Organization, you are talking about the making of the institution you used to run 98 weeks in Beirut, an institution that programmatically wanted to present itself as an eco-feminist institution. And you were trying to interrogate how to translate critical practices that artists, writers in Beirut were using into an institutional practices, because you were saying there was a sort of a discrepancy between what was said and then the real structures that were being created and in which you were acting. So how did you then arrive to analyze the Kurdish autonomous movement, women's movement? So what did you learn from these radical political feminist structures, and how then what you learned could be potentially, if you would still be leading 98 weeks, could be used to implement an institution? And I ask that because talking again about another context and talking about Savi and we ourselves here, of course, when we think about feminism, when we think about a project like that, is not that we're just willing to discuss, make an exhibition, but we're really thinking about ways to challenge the structures that we are in, that it's always in becoming, and that we want to, yes, to change also. So. Exactly. So it's not easy. It's not easy to analyze it from inside, and that's why these sort of conversations can be very useful. And somehow we are talking about environment, but this is also something that has to do with an ecology of practices and an ecology of working together, etc., etc., etc. I don't want to hijack the conversation.
Yeah, at the end we closed 98 weeks. Yeah, at the end of the feminism's project, we closed.
Like to say, it's not possible.
And no, I don't know if it's not possible, but in the context of 98 weeks, because also, you know, the means and there is so much pressure on the people who are running it. All the pressure is on really, you know, on these individuals who are running it to bring the money, to, you know, do everything to, you know, build an institution. It's at the end you understand that it's not possible, and you are trying to compensate for something that someone else should do. Actually, you understand that this is I don't know, maybe in another world, in another situation, yeah, should be given money to do all of that, or at least to be able to, you know, survive, or like the state or the government should be paying you because you're doing this work, or and after realizing this, yeah, I mean, you just we decided to close. It's not so direct. I mean, it's like also, but I think that this is why it's interesting to think about all these like NGO structures in relation to more like political project. I mean, I'm not saying we should all politicize or like join the party or something. That's not the claim, but in fact, in all of these NGO structures, what happens is that individuals are pulled out, especially if it's related to the art world and the art market and, you know, this whole like economy. Individuals are pulled out as individuals because this is what art world wants at the end. You know, they want like this individual name, and of course you can, you know, fight against that or like resist that. And there's like a million strategies to go about this, and there's like also amazing artists that have, you know, dealt with this issue. But what happens in this case is that everything you are thinking about of how to work together within this institution, how to actually, let's say, implement these feminist politics of working together becomes so difficult as well. And yeah, I mean, we found it like really, really difficult, especially that we didn't have any, you know, like sustainable funding, and so we found very difficult to come up with this ideal institution when you are not paid for your work, and when you are, so there is something really, this institution becomes like a bubble of, you know, some ideals that is really not materialized in any kind of economy or.
Yeah, I just think we just met, so we didn't know each other before this event, but I hope we will speak more. And so this is just a little bit set into the blue, but my feeling is if you are a person who has invested so much energy in this, most likely you will do more collaborative work in the future, because this somehow you can't avoid it, you know, like even if you're super frustrated with how this ended, the next thing will come up, new alliances, new people, new friends, and then the next thing will feel fantastic. So I hope that will happen. I just, you know, this is a little bit my experience. And I think it's so important, all this work that is done for free, as you are also doing in Savi. Yeah, it's super important. And of course, there's always these moments, yeah, where you are exhausted, where things don't work, or I don't know. But just a little bit to say, you know, like our little project here with Eva, we actually don't really know. We are just starting it, you know. It's like actually this evening, the first moment we publicly say we will do it, because it took me some time after the breakdown of FF to recover and to say, I want to venture into new collaboration. So we start as 2 people. We don't know what will come out of it, how many will be in 20 years, or if it will still exist. But what we want to do, or what I learned, was a little bit to not operate in a closed group anymore, not like to say we are 16 people and that's, you know, us, but to say we are like a mobile unit, you know, and each project we might work with different people that might, you know, come to that project because they naturally belong to it, but then to move on and maybe the next time, you know, like collaborate with new people. And this is a little bit has become my method of working. And may I ask you a question? Because I'm just really curious about your artistic practice. Now we just saw this short excerpt from the film. I'm really curious to know how you see yourself as an artist in relation to this villages you're working with. Is it more like are you a witness, or are you a researcher? Are you involved? How is it?
Yeah, and actually, it's also part of my PhD work, research. So yeah, I mean, it's not the. We collaborated with a lot of the autonomous women's movement through the project space or research project that I was co-running. So this goes back to an older collaboration, as we had invited some of the members to Beirut to do like a different events, and we translated some of their texts as well. And then I went back to visit them. So it's been like a long collaboration. I am not part of the movement, of course. I think it's for me a kind of a I mean, I don't know how to describe it as something that is. For me, it's still like a learning process of how the structure is working, the relationship between political ideology and theory, and how things are put into practice. For me, it's it's still like a learning process in this direction. I don't think I'm a witness, because I know this artist witnessed you know, like a position. I think there's like many witnesses. But I think I'm more like a I don't know, friend, ally, or for now. And let's. Yeah.
So the things that you are learning through your artwork, you're letting us participate in learning. Could that be correct? Yeah. Like we can also learn about them, about the villages through you. You're like a mediator, maybe. Sorry that I'm looking for words, but I find this very interesting. This question: who are you yourself? You know, in the middle of all this as an artist. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe. I mean,
And if you're there as an artist or as a woman or as
yeah, that's the thing. It's also like you are not always like you are. I mean, you are an artist because this is what you do, but that's not all you are as well. So you don't have to define everything through the artwork or through like the work that you're doing. Yeah. So
Maybe we open to the public. Yes. Come. Maybe you wanna. Do you mind coming here because I don't know.
No, I just had a question regarding to the River Sisters. Just a topic before. It was interesting to me to hear like either it's if it's not economical purpose, it has like a touristic purpose. And I was wondering, like every time if you think about land, we think about a function or a purpose. And have you thoughts about this, like how to think out of this frame when we talk about nature or land?
I think it's I have to situate it somehow. River Sisters and other movements, like movements or groups or collect. I don't know. It's really like this language is bothering me. All that like collectives and groups are all not the best words for how I feel. Communities maybe. Because, for example, to the exhibition in Hamburger Bahnhof, we invited with Antje, Agnieszka Brzeżańska and Ewa Ciepielewska, the artists who were sailing on a Wisła River every year for 3 months, and they organized a kind of a mobile artistic residency. Yeah, there. So I'm also a part of it somehow, and we too, have been on the river with them, and we know this project that what is shown in the exhibitions only like one of the translations of what is happening actually there on the river. And I don't know, there is no I'm talking about this because there is no simple answer on it. I think that that attachment to the place you live and the doubts you have that you're in between of this like you're a part of different systems, political, ecological, economical system, that this is not enough, that this is not fulfill your need to identify yourself and to identify your attachment to the place and to your attachment to the to river or something else. Yeah, so I think we still have to look for better language to describe it, yeah, but it's really strongly related with this multi identities we have, yeah, and which are not only which goes beyond all normative categories we are identified by, yeah. So and this project, it's not also a project. What we try to do with Antje, with IFA, yeah, with this another collective I'm part of, and there are a lot of collectives or communities I'm part of. is also about this, that at some point we felt that we are fed up with our institutional roles, yeah, and with the roles we perform for the audience usually, yeah, that she is an artist, I'm curator, now she is a co-curator of the exhibition, I'm also curator. So this is like, this is not about like the biggest potential of collaboration is somewhere else, yeah, and cultural institutions recognize it already, that this is really a topic, but they don't know what to do with it really. And so I think that I'm also employee of a public, like, you know, institution, a museum, you know, so yeah.
Just to add, I mean, my dream as a first project for IFA would be to buy forests, actually, because I want to, yeah, we were talking about this, just, you know, if it's possible, I mean, would be great to buy a rather large piece of forest and then just to let it be, you know, that would be really good as a good. Yeah, yeah, there are many, as soon as we set up an association, we have a lot of possibilities because we can get money from EU and all kinds of things. And I want to kind of subvert this, yeah. So this would be one project that I'm really interested in. Another thing that I'm thinking about a lot is like, I'm really starting to think a lot about economics because I think there's a lot that is not functioning well in the art system. As you said, you know, this way of like singling out single people and, you know, that's like I really strongly think that we can resist this. Yeah, and so, yeah, there's a lot of things to discuss and to think about. Yeah.
There is a question there. Antje, could you pass this? Sorry.
I'm interested in how you think across urban and rural divides. I mean, lots of artists are in cities, but a lot of what you're talking about in relation to the commons is in relation to big spaces where non-humans can do lots of activity there. Rural people tend to be conservative in the sense they like things as they are, but they also want development. There's many different aspects to that, of course, and it works differently across, I'm sure, northern Syria and in the Polish situation. But maybe you could just speak to some of the alliances that you see happening as artists probably coming from the city. I don't know your biographies or backgrounds, but now in the city and working with elements of the commons as nature, as rural space.
Who's your question directed to? To us all or all of you? Yes.
Go ahead.
Well, I actually only live part-time here in the city. I live like I'm registered in Brandenburg in a village, a rather small village, and I have a garden there. So that I own. But I have a very basic, yeah, I really don't believe in this. Yeah, I mean, but on the paper I own it. So I take care of the plants in that garden, so I have a rather like close relationship to these other living beings, but of course this is a small space. And this is why I would like to have a bigger space that I would co-own with other people and in which we wouldn't do anything. This would be really very nice. I don't know if that answers the question, but of course our means are limited, yeah? I mean, I think it would be great to have even bigger spaces. Yeah, I don't know if that answers your question. Maybe you want to say something?
I have to think about it.
You have to think about it.
Do you want to add something? Yeah. Yeah, I can talk. I can talk I can talk about flow. So this sailing on the Wisła within the frame of this mobile residency, which is not official, is founded by. Yeah, it's actually it's very interesting because it's found source of foundings are very different. Yeah, but usually the artists Ewa Ciepielewska and Agnieszka Brzeżańska, they let's say use institutions. Yeah, they don't like they don't enter into institutions, but they use them to fund different elements of this travel. So to pay for the oil, to pay for the food, because it's all free. Yeah? You can join, even not being an artist, you can join us at some point, and you know, this is great. And yes, so regarding this question about city and like the countryside, and while sailing Wisła, you meet different people, and there is also a huge now for Poland huge movement of raftmen, yes, who also sail on the wooden boats, and this is these are mostly male, and these groups are pretty conservative, but in the end, when they like, so they can argue about like many things, yeah, many really, like. But on the other hand, they have this common ground, yeah, which is Wisła. So they all see dangers in this ideas of industrialization of the river. Yeah, so this is obvious. We will fight with it together, although we don't agree on many other things. Yeah, so.
There is another question.
Hi, thank you to all of you. It was great to listen. And I have like question to all of you, and it's like about transmitting basically, and how is like the importance for you spread in between like opening a certain methodology or conceptual approach towards certain topic, and in between kind of transmitting experience, how you play around those two. And like secondly, it's like, as I have kind of feeling that always when you kind of relate to nature, like physically, there is a certain like patterns which are coming, like tendency to kind of mythologizing things or kind of ritual approach. And through that I was like pretty much interesting how it's like, and it's relating to the previous question, what's kind of like thinking about ritual, or like what's transparent like documentation of a ritual when you present in a gallery space. So yeah, that's from my side.
Please start.
I don't know, I can answer from, if I understood the question right. So, and I think in the research I'm doing, for example, with the woman that has the archive, the herbal archive, I consider it a kind of like a transmission of her knowledge somehow. What I am showing, or what I am like trying to, and yeah, I mean, we can think about research also in general. Think about research as this sort of like, of course, a transmission of knowledge. So what is interesting is maybe to think about the different forms that this can take. And going back to the question of the position of the researcher, maybe this is also, I mean, maybe it's interesting to think about, for example, when you're working with film, to think about the filmic apparatus as a tool for research, right? So the filmic, or like the set itself, or like the film set, or as a tool and the methodology for research. But also there is an interesting Yeah, there's an interesting question here where it's also related to how you kind of relate to the knowledge that you are transmitting. And maybe this goes back to your question in terms of like, okay, so we're dealing with a kind of like a non-urban or like rural spaces, and you're coming maybe from like an urban I mean, not to make this division like between the rural and the urban, as if like this there is like a separation of knowledge between but what can actually be thought of is this kind of like knowledge, maybe in the case of what I am working on, this sort of like female knowledge that can be transmitted across spaces and across and through like this I don't know, across media or medium as well of you know, of transmission or like yeah, tool of research. Yeah, I mean, it's a quite complex question, but yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I think I would also, you said across spaces, and I think this is a little bit, I was, you know, I would try to answer your question honestly, which is not so easy. But I would say that, you know, each exhibition or each artwork can have several levels of entering points, yeah, and but let's take, for example, the work that I showed briefly about this garden in Wittenberg and Luther and Rosa Luxemburg and so on. Actually, the garden, what I didn't explain was it's planted from, all the plants in this garden are taken from the herbarium of Rosa Luxemburg, who was a botanist and who collected plants. So maybe, you know, the exhibition tried to open up like a historical space, yeah, because, you know, I was asked by the curators to do something about Luther, so I went back to this time, but to come across that and then to see, okay, what was the Marxist analysis, because Wittenberg was part of the DDR, what was the Marxist analysis of the peasant movement and how it was stopped, yeah, by people like Luther, and what does this mean for all these poor peasants, yeah, who were still in the serfdom until 1809, and what was, you know, so this is why I replaced Luther by Rosa Luxemburg, who was the first one to make a really precise analysis of how imperialism and capitalism are actually one and the same, yeah, and swallowing up all the so-called free labor or free land or free air or whatever you have that is free, and so how, you know, actually this international solidarity is not an empty word. It's really, you know, because these things are linked at the basis, you know. So I think this is also what you're doing in Savi, to understand that feminism, ecology, and decolonialization are three things that shouldn't be separated as they're often done, but they are actually linked at the basis. Now this sounds very theoretical. Yeah, it sounds very theoretical. I wanted to give an example of an installation where entering this historical space could mean a lot of research, could mean a lot, like even maybe reading some text, or could mean, you know, analyzing things. But you could have a different situation in which a person is coming to that little garden and just entering it and just seeing these flowers, and the person only reads maybe this garden is dedicated to Rosa Luxemburg, and not even reading the text, and he just thinks, oh, this is really nice. Someone planted some beautiful flowers for this woman, you know, who, and that would also be totally correct and really fine by me, yeah. So, and also the garden is carried on now. There's like a group of handicapped people who are like employed to take care of the garden for the next years. I think, you know, to create these kind of spaces in which all these things can coexist, different layers of interpretation, different ways of experiencing it, different possibilities for the visitor also to engage, is for me super important, you know. So if someone wishes to enter the work in a spiritual way, I'm absolutely happy with this, But I will not propose a ritual, because a ritual would already nail it down too much. Yeah. So I would rather want to open up a space in which spirituality is possible to experience. Yeah. If you want this, if that's your, if that's the way you enter into the thing. If, on the other hand, you prefer to have a Marxist analysis, you're also completely free to to use that tool, right? Yeah. No, I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah. No, maybe also I wanted to add one more thing. It's that the thinking process happening, like situated thinking process, I think is important in this case. Like situated in specific geography, specific land. And so sometimes the place becomes also like an excuse for thinking further a certain question. So sometimes it's not really about the subject, right? But it's more about like talking about methodology, like a way of thinking from, for example, this particular land or this particular kind of agriculture, or so it's like a kind of a departure to think, or like a starting point to think.
I think we take the last question over, and then we close. But we also have a bar, so we can have like a more kind of informal conversation if you have other questions. But last question over.
Thank you. How do I do this? It's a short. It's a short. I sit on the table. Yeah. Marwa, I have a question for you from your observations, which something that I'm curious about, and I want to connect back actually to this conflict between the war and the ecological progressive thinking situation that happens at the moment. We know that there were many people who joined to fight in the Rojava resistance from the international circles, I mean the international solidarity. And I wonder if there are people who are continuing to be part of the project on this level that you shared with us, and and what kind of, let's say, integration process that this is happening, this living together, because it's also a sort of experiment that happens also outside only the let's say the regional publics of Rojava only. So that's one question. And the second question I have about the film, because sorry, I think it's important to clarify about the visual strategy of the film, but maybe the film of Who's Afraid of Ideology that I want to ask, maybe it will clarify some other things of your artistic strategies. Yeah, the one I saw. So, but maybe first this one and then the other one shortly, and then we close.
Yeah, I mean about the there is like an internationalist commune. Yeah. So yeah, you know that there is a internationalist commune. This is what you were asking about also.
Yeah. I mean, I heard about the internationalist commune exactly, and I'm wondering how this communication is happening now at this stage. Like when the war is sort of receding, it's still there, but
outside also.
Yeah, and
You want to say something, Antje? Or then I thank you so much for being part of this last event, and thank you all. Thank you. And now you can have a drink.